let's conclude this conference with some final remarks and discussion, and then is Feierabend. Okay, so the streaming can start. Now I can give the sign that I forgot to give the last fishbowl. Welcome everyone back. It's again me, I'm sorry, it's a bit... but Walter gave me this honor to conclude this, to start these conclusions and to moderate this concluding discussion. And I would maybe ask before, or no, maybe we can put some, I just would make my arguments. I wrote down some points that for me were interesting, like in the last days, and then I would ask also to the workshops. We can make it first to the workshops, yeah, maybe it make more sense. So I would warmly ask the three persons, there were three persons responsible to take notes in the workshops about what's happening and summarizing it here. So one is already here, Walter, Robert, and we miss one person, here. Okay, so maybe the floor is yours. Who wants to start? There is...
I can start as we had workshop 1, but basically I tracked down on our flip chart.
I can bring.
Okay.
Oh.
So we had the opportunity to talk about 1945, focusing on women, rules, images, narratives that evolved in the aftermath of the war, and we had two speakers with us who are here right now. It's we had Jana from Cynic from Skopje presenting one journal, Makedonka, which is a women journal. Basically, we framed it as an agitprop journal, and also we had the chance to talk about an Albanian version of the agitprop from these times, Emira, and this one was called Albanian Women. And both of these journals were founded and were based on women authors. And this was already the first remarkable thing, as there is generally a lack of sources on women history. And yeah, the effort of Jana and her organization basically is to make this whole journal Makedonka accessible by digitalization of a remarkable amount of issues. The journal existed from 1944 till 1952, and in this time there was 83 issues, and also she, with a couple of other authors, edited a critical revision on many of the journal that can be found also here, and it's also in a digital version accessible. And yeah, we had also Tamar chairing the session, and yeah, and she made us also aware again that commemoration generally is always a choice of each society what to remember and how. And when we had, during the last 2 days, talks from different country perspectives, and sometimes it might have felt difficult to bridge the different narratives. So women history basically can be seen as something universal, as we find it in all, I mean, it's a universal approach. And also there was some remarkable parallels, despite we have this unique direction Albania took after the war. Yeah, and basically what was depicted from both journals who emerged in this last years of the war, and then for the Macedonian case, it, as I said, it was there until 1952, and Albanian Women, this journal existed until the 90s. Basically, they were turning around the images of women as workers first, as mothers, and also as wives, and doing the households. So this was quite the reference point in both the societies. And sexual reproductive rights was mostly limited to motherhood. So if we can say it that black and white. And yeah, the topics, as one can also imagine, was all around the variety of women activities or so-called women activities. Also politics was an issue, labor, a bit religion, mothers, sports. There was also a science section, and in the very end of each journal, a sewing instruction. So a bit stereotypically. Yeah, and for Macedonia, we also discussed that feminism in general was, and also back then, was perceived as a Western import. So this backlash is, we can say, now and then valid. And yeah, also for Albania, it was interesting that even though there was always Italy as a fixed point for orientation and Italian looks, when it came for the anti-fascist image of women, they were mostly represented as having very masculine looks, so a very black and white picture. And yeah. Thankfully to CINIC, to the organization of Vienna, the whole publication is already accessible in the project Invisible Archives. We can also share, and I would recommend this for many of the great projects that we heard about in the last 2 days. We can share a list of links to make it also accessible to all of us here in the conference and beyond. And please add if you want to, Tamar.
Thank you very much.
You were the second group. That's okay. So correct. It was the working group on return. The working group on return, and we had 2 short inputs. One by Seda Grigorian. She's a media professional, a filmmaker, and she told us about a film shot in Armenia on German prisoners of war, who some of them were later, in particular person later returning to Armenia to see the places where he spent his time during his prisonership in Armenia, and it's a kind of very moving story about the capacities of humans to cooperate, one may say. Yeah? The German prisoners of war tend to have a positive image in Armenia, thanks to the solid bridges, solid buildings they've built, but also to some kind of human relationship that emerged. When arriving there as prisoners of war, they were met with stones. People throw stones at them. When they left, it was a kind of farewell, moving kind of saying farewell to them. This is the kind of story being told in this documentary, which is based on oral witnesses, many of them in Germany, but also on oral witnesses in Armenia and Armenian villages. And it describes the continuing suffering after the end of the war. The second presentation we had was a quite different project from Korab Krasnici, I think he's left, from Pristina. He works in a kind of pro-peace project and portrays, in a publication, portrays Yugoslav women, ex-Yugoslav women from different ex-Yugoslav countries who, based on the war memories of their families and the war legacies, now engage in anti-war movements and anti-war initiatives. Some of them we even know well because they have been guests at the History Forum or at different Böll events, so it was kind of very familiar circle of important women from former Yugoslavia countries. And the story told here, or the message sent, is the kind of how to come from trauma to memory, how to from silence to speaking out, how to address historical inaccuracies, and how to develop out of a kind of intergenerational legacy the capacity for resistance. Yeah, this is the kind of story told. What we, in the discussion that was then also enriched by reports from colleague from Memorial, Evelina Rudenko, who told us about their research work on forced laborers returning to the Soviet Union and being discriminated. Many of them, about 20%, were directly repressed of returnees, both prisoners of war, but also forced laborers as collaborators. But basically 100% of them were discriminated as suspicious people who somehow managed to survive and even worked for the enemy. But what became quite clear in the discussion is that none of these stories fits into a black and white scheme. Yeah? If you really research individual biographies, they are always complex. They are always people who changed sides, who had to save their lives and became part of the German army for some reason. Others who, prisoners of war. There was the case of Konrad Lorenz, a famous scientist, biologist, who later became even a Nobel Prize laureate, but turned out to be a very active Nazi in his youth, yeah, and a committed Nazi as a soldier. So he's been treated in Germany now with certain cautiousness, and this is something that was not known before to Armenian colleagues. Yeah. You learned it later in Germany. Yeah. So there are no stories are always very complex, and also the stories of return. There are many different groups affected by World War II who had to return. For example, Chechens who were deported in connection with the Second World War and much later could somehow return, but also a story of return that is very little known and seldom told. Many of people affected by return stories often had different roles, ambivalent roles, first as perpetrators, later as victims, or again as perpetrators. There was also, of course, the story of forced return to the Soviet Union. People were captured and brought back, or were even handed over by the Western allies to the Soviet troops, according to international agreements. People who did not want to return but were forcibly returned. So if you want this kind of conclusion or additional research ideas, it's definitely worth to explore individual stories with all the contradictions and complexities. You should never try to exclude them in order to tell a nice story, but better include all these contradictions and complexities. It seemed to me, at least, that the question, for example, if returnees were differently treated according to their gender is not very much researched yet. A very interesting question how returnees, women and men, were treated differently. And, for example, the question how returning Red Army soldiers perceived German prisoners of war. So returning Armenian soldiers, how did they perceive the then existing German prisoners of war, or how was it the situation in Russia with people returning back from Germany? How did they perceive, or did they even meet German prisoners of war still present there? So these kind of questions still open a broad field for research.
Thank you very much.
All right, then let me come to our third group on the monuments. We somehow didn't present it on a wall with cards, but well, we can add that anyway then to the final communication to all participants, I guess, that will be there. The outcomes of the working groups. So in our working group workshop, we had two presentations. I think both of the presenters are not here anymore. First one by Nare Sahakian on from Armenia about her case study research of the story behind one impressionist style painting of an artist, Edward Isabekian, a painting that shows a picture of the end of the war, a hero and his fallen son that died. So the story of this, she presented the story of this painting that appeared, or that was produced in 1445, but was then very quickly criticized very much from Stalinist authorities because the painting looked too lively and had too many references to the golden age of the Armenian history in the 5th century. Of religious martyrdom for the nation, and that was kind of too much for the way the end of the war should have been portrayed, and therefore a few years later a new version of this painting appeared or was produced by the same artist, and that looked much more simple and not just a black and white painting, and without the colors and without this religious references. So quite interesting to see that this discussion on how to remember, how to commemorate the end of the war, how that reflected in the arts in this case. So quite interesting example. And the second presentation by Eva Jakubowska on her still ongoing research on the Soviet war memorials in Germany. And so she is looking into a number of war memorials, but we were specifically talking about only 3 of them here in Berlin, in Tiergarten, in Treptower Park, and in Pankow, the quite big and significant memorial sites to the end of the war here in Berlin. And the different contexts in which they were planned and then interpreted from kind of spirit of anti-Hitler coalition, still in 45, very much in 45, and then later going to Soviet heroism, and after 1990, then to kind of putting it into the Russian, claiming the Russian ownership of these memorial sites. very different from the first presentation, but equally interesting to talk about it and to look into it. Yeah, and so we discussed a wide range of aspects with regard to those memorials and how to deal with them, and also lots of complexities related to that, and need to do more research and to think above all about how to deal with it in future. Yeah. So the first and very significant question is who is actually included in the commemoration of these memorial sites, because it's very often in this kind of memorial site monuments, they commemorate only the soldiers that have been killed on the way to the liberation of Germany, of Berlin, on the way to Berlin, yeah, but not the Soviet prisoners of war, and not to talk about the forced laborers, Soviet citizens who died in Germany in that period. Yeah, and we were also talking about the appropriation of the victims by the Russian state. Yeah, though it is known that approximately a quarter of the buried people in Treptower Park, for example, are Ukrainians, but still kind of the Russian narratives and Russian embassy and claims ownership of all the whole site and of all the victims there as victims of the Russian victory over Nazi Germany. And also some interesting, one interesting case that Eva shared about Russian embassy really being involved in blocking the memorial site to Ukrainian demonstrators in 2022. So in the context of the current war, yeah, and then I already briefly mentioned with regard to the future of how to deal with these sites in the future. There's of course a lot of necessity to look into it much more. What should be demolished, or is that an option to demolish those sites partly or fully? Or because it might be misused, or turning the idea of commemoration upside down, yeah, or and that's the more likely version, of course, to what kind of additions to do to contextualize the sites to allow for also different perspectives, and because the site itself is of course also a story that tells a lot. Yeah. Okay, so I think I should stop here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have half an hour, and I would propose that please stay here, Robert, so we are not here, two of us. So, and I would propose that to use this space to share what actually for us was especially important. What was a point that we reflected on in these 2 days, and there is like always this exercise that I made with my students where I was teaching. what you cannot remember everything of a conference, but you can also bring 3 items at home. So in your bag. So what are these 3 items? And maybe sharing these 3 items, what we are bringing home from this conference, it's also a way to create a kind of conclusions. What was important is these days. And I can maybe just start sharing 3 points very briefly. That the first one is the question of the present, how the present war changed the perspective on the Second World War. And I think that what I found it very interesting that I had the impression that this went in 2 directions. On the one side, bringing the experience of the war way near, making like way more relevant, like the discussing of the Second World War, politicizing, colonizing again from side of the Soviet, of Russia, the memory of the war. And on the other side, but also like the question of relevance is not only like the Second World War is not only gaining relevance, but I have also an impression that there were some people commenting that was also losing relevance in comparison to the present war. So this was the question of relevance. I had the impression that was very interesting in this, and was not unique. Also in the workshop of women was a comment on that. How is creating this relevance of the Second World War still now after 80 years or not? So this is what surely for me is it's a question. And the second you are also mentioning is Walter, but was also from many persons coming this comment about the complexity and how actually it's we had like this complexity in this scale between resistance and collaboration. So this is not like here resistance and here collaboration, but it's a whole scale of nuances, of gray tones between them, or we can see the complexity in returning. So, like this topic of how it's complex, it's coming back, and how actually complexity is a response to propaganda, to politicization, to use this what are made nowadays of the memory of the Second World War, and. Yeah, maybe these 2 points are what I want to share with you, and maybe someone want to jump in.
Let me add from my side maybe one moment, because I was pretty much fascinated yesterday by the series of presentations of the projects that exist. Yeah, because I'm not working in this field. I'm kind of not every day dealing with this. But I was fascinated because it shows so much variety of material that exists. And I asked myself the question of how to get this in, like to the young generation today, to students, to raise curiosity on history, on this part of the history in particular, yeah, but also on history in more general terms. How to integrate that also into school education, yeah, because as a father of 3 girls, the older 2 have their history lessons in school, and I'm always asking myself, why isn't it possible to do interesting history lessons? There's so much material around here, but they are just chronologically telling history, and but they are not creating the spirit of curiosity on what's going on in history, and so many interesting options exist, and researched stories, and in different formats with graphic novels and films and whatever else, and maps, and so why is it so complicated to improve the history lessons? Completely different aspect. I'm sorry to bring this in, but this is what I had in mind yesterday night. Yeah.
Very important point.
Sorry, I'm talking too much today, but it's the end.
I'm talking too much.
So I don't know if there are 3 things, but 2 for sure. So the first thing is I kind of challenged again my stereotyping, which is something that I like when it happens. I'm not happy, but I'm happy afterward. So some of my students are, Andy knows and Linda knows, are former military, like American former military guys, because they are mostly men. And sometimes they refer to themselves as victims and also as slaves, or which was something different for me, because I'm not fond of war, so soldier was not really something for me to be so proud. And yesterday, while listening to Yaroslav, I had this kind of challenging to what I was thinking, because he said that commemorations are so toxic, which is something that I agree, because I was looking at the commemorations as toxic because they were kind of enhancing this masculinity. But then I was thinking that they are also toxic against men, because they are just like, they are, how do you say, celebrating war. They are just celebrating, like, sending men mostly to the front. So that was something really important for me, to have this idea that war is toxic, commemorations are toxic, because they are also, we talk about war from the point of view of people that were not in the front line. So that's why it's so exotic. It's not exotic at all. So that was something that's really like made me a little bit reflect, but was also very helpful. Like, maybe I seem stupid to you now because you all thought that before me, but I was happy to be reflecting on that. Something else was also regarding collaborators, and I live in France, so this is an ongoing discussion even today. So who were the collaborators and everything, and the most important thing was this conviction that I had, but now I'm very happy that, like, I'm really pushing on it. It's the intersectional approach to the politics of memory. So I mean, when I say we, it's myself, so I'm not giving order, but I really need to push on this intersectional perspective, because there are always groups who were not visible for any reason, and so we can always dig and understand some reason, and it's so helpful also for today. So and it was great for networking, so from a very pragmatic point of view. So but yeah, there are 3 things that I'm going home with.
Thank you. Oh.
It was a very good idea to have a focus on Southeast Europe. And today, when I was in the first group about women, I noticed next time we have to talk about socialism. Yeah, really, because not Soviet Union. Soviet Union is just a part. Because looking to the Balkan states, and we talked about journals made by women committees, but in the back of these committees were the party, the Communist Party, and we didn't talk about the party. And partisan movement is the same. It's organized by communist parties. The Soviet Union, Tito, and so on and so on. So, in remembering World War II, or the heritage of, the victory about what? About fascism. It's once again the perspective of communist movements, I would say, parties. And falling apart from Moscow means something. Tito, Hoxha, and so on. So. The opening was in Karlshorst. I'm very proud. Thank you for that. We are, but we are an example for the Moscow-centered remembering. But this is not all. And even if you look to, the women movement, the partisan movement, next time, please, we have to talk about socialism.
Let's talk about socialism. Okay, thank you. We had also a task for the next year. Someone else want to share? Directly called.
I'm going to answer now because, well, there's a lot of thoughts during these 2 days that were very intensive, but we didn't feel like tired, or we were always hearing all speakers and all people who input like questions and comments. And to me personally, it was like always thinking about how, let's say, a war is like that camera there, and it has like to get around and see everybody and understand everybody. And at the end of this, it's horrible. It's an activity of humanity since its beginnings, and it's still continuing. And this is so sad. And now that we are returning back to dictators, to murderers, to perpetrators, to victims, and so on. And I feel that, as I said at the beginning, Germany is the right place, and Berlin as a city with such historical values, especially in the 20th century, is that symbol of that, let's say, idea of discussing and thinking about the past, and thinking and rethinking and studying and learning new things. And also, to me, it's like an obligation to study more, to read more, to understand more about things that I didn't know well, or I didn't know nothing at all. So it's a call for further readings. And also, if I can add one other comments, and I would take back the idea of you bringing Southeastern Europe in Berlin helped you a lot getting some back. So probably you should definitely invite more and more South European countries. Of course, also because we are hoping to become part of the European Union very soon, they say. So probably we will meet again each other more often than now. So thank you for inviting us, and it was an honor and a privilege being here and listening and learning so much new things. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So I think everyone is quite tired. Please.
Just one more thought, also by Jaroslav Frysztacka from the very beginning. I was also touched when he referred to, I think it was a historian from the Hermitage who pointed to the fact that the NKVD actually, who was not part of the war as a soldier, they formed our images of Second World War from Red Army. And this beautifying of war that is ongoing, the dominant narrative probably in today's Russia, and maybe not even only Russia, this is quite something to think about. So where's our images coming from? And also then in this working group that we had with Tamar, in the very end, it was also clear that institutions nowadays in Albania, they do not do the commemorating. They are not capable of it, but it's more the civil initiatives, civil societies, maybe even the same for Macedonia. So, I mean, I think this is just a bridge that I take back home, that yeah, history is not what it is, but it's pretty much made from different perspectives.
There were so many references to today's workshop. Maybe I'm gonna make this point, which was, by the way, inspired by yesterday's sessions and the reflections. The question I posed was like, what it is that makes the past events relevant to present? What is the relevance as such composed by, and what is the relevance brings us back and forth and makes us somehow linger between the past and present and refer to the past and learn from the past to somehow make some lessons in the present. And I was like thinking maybe these are like four main things. The first are the institutions, which somehow create the structures which like come across the time and move through the time. This is the one thing. Maybe the second thing is some kind of the patterns, the historical patterns, which are not basically mainly based in institutions, but somehow kind of cultural undercurrents or the social and so on and so forth. The third point about the relevance could be also the way humans think. The pattern that human beings are just like thinking, and there is like very interesting point by White made that like there is like some kind of common sense shared by the broad amount of the people, and they are like somehow that the history rhymes, right? Like it repeats and makes the same mistakes, goes on the same circles, and we can refer to this when historians like I'm struck by the when I'm reading about the materials before the World War II, for example, the debates, the thoughts, the questions they posed, these are quite similar, and you can say that it really rhymes to today's kind of ongoing processes. And the fourth and the final kind of thought I had about and all these thoughts were inspired by the yesterday's discussions, was that this kind of, maybe we arrive in the kind of similar material and social conditions, which somehow also bring us to this kind of same kind of repeating the same mistakes and same kind of problems. And I mean, the thing is, like, we cannot say for sure what it is, but like the case of Yugoslavia, for example, is very interesting. Former Yugoslavia, which has been somehow dissolved, and now there is no institutions as such, right? There is like different kind of patterns, like there is different kind of things, and how we can read through dissolved and non-existent kind of constructs, the remnants of these constructs. And there was like, when Jana talked about the journal she brought, it was like really interesting how she made her way through different kind of institutions, researchers, historians, to find and locate where the entire issue of this journal was located. So, and this was like just like very general reflections I made today, and we had a really interesting conversation, and again, thanks to the participants. But yes, and yesterday, of course, the Yaroslav's kind of pointing out, and for example, right now I'm thinking a lot about the Second World War in terms of this kind of home front, back front, and the front. And how is this, because I'm coming from Georgia, I'm from Tbilisi, so Tbilisi was not the part of this kind of front, right? So what is it that the Georgian people think about themselves, how they contributed to the war, right? And what is that the home fronts contributed to somehow defeat, and how they are processing this kind of, that not being the front, but also being the part of the war. So this was also a very good point he made about the rares, and it's gonna really stick to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I would maybe like to add one point to this four. I heard already you made these 4 points in the workshop, and I find it super interesting. And I thought that there is at least one fifth point that is actually the witnesses, and so the relevance is created by people telling their stories in their families, or not telling it, or telling it later in certain moments. So I think that that's also a crucial point of this relevance, and yeah, and maybe also a perception of time circulating or going forward. We are kind of sticking now in a very idea of repeating the time, that it's very, yeah. But thank you. I was very inspired. I don't know. If there is no, I would then thank you very much, everyone, and I would give you Walter, the word for a last conclusion.
Well, first, I allow myself also to take away 2 things.
Yes.
One is, I found the last round of discussion also extremely interesting and somehow frustrating. If you see how many instruments, how many thoughts have been invested into transitional justice even before the Second World War, and where we are today, this is a frustrating thought. Yeah, it should not frustrate us so much. This is kind of the usual way history is going up and down, and but still, and this is also about why history is often so instructing. Yeah, to see how similar people in a different time have dealt and faced the same challenges. Yeah, so it's not about there is one success and then the next success and then the next success, and we all are improving all the time. No, it's same challenges in different times, and to look at this, I think, is absolutely instructive. And the second thing which occupies me is often the question or the difference or the tension between a certain need for moral judgment of past crimes and wars and acts, like, of course, the German crimes, the terrible war they waged, or the Soviet crimes, and so, and the need for differentiation, for not telling only black and white stories. I'm somehow convinced that the best anti-propaganda against propaganda like the Russian one now is not a kind of, when Putin says, oh, they are good people, we say, no, they are bad people, but it's complexity. It's much, propaganda simplifies everything, and historians' task, but also enlightenment should be, no, it's much, much more complex, and you just leave out, you falsify, of course, but also you leave out thousands of perspectives and thousands of facts. And I think this is a very good lesson for myself, always to be repeated. Well, and last word is just thank you all. I think every time after the History Forum, I am proud to be a manager at a foundation, and I regret to be a manager at a foundation. I'm proud because we have the opportunity to bring so many interesting, brilliant people together. This is really a great honor, and it's just read all your CVs. It's so fascinating what you are doing, and how connected all of you are, and we are. And in many ways, there are so many interesting things, and I thought there was absolutely no challenge this time to bridge the different regions and different countries. There were so many connections, and this was absolutely natural and really great. And of course, and I regret to be a foundation manager because I would love to invest my time into research, into books, into reading, and not into, well, whatever is doing connected with some other kind of foundations work. But it was definitely great to have all you here. I hope you follow up on this meeting with your own work, but also in contact with all our colleagues in the respective offices, with all the brilliant projects you are investing your time in. And well, I'm absolutely optimistic we will see again, because I look at Peter here. We've met, I think, many years ago at a History Forum, and he comes on his own initiative here to attend the next History Forum. So it's, I think many of us will meet again, and this makes me very optimistic. Thank you all, and we will have a last offer of dinner in about 20-30 minutes, and then have a safe trip back wherever you come from, and see you next time. Thank you. And sorry, I still want to mention two of my Berlin colleagues who have done most of the logistics work. This is Nina Happe and Jana Falkenroth. Where is Jana? We can really be proud. It was worth doing it.
Danke dir. Ich teile total das Gefühl von Sehnen nach Geschichte.